You want to know how smart the system really is? It doesn't just crush dissent. It manufactures it. It packages it. It sells it back to you at a premium price with a money-back guarantee that nothing will ever actually change. Meet your resistance leaders. Ben Shapiro, net worth $20 million. Tucker Carlson, net worth $30 million. Jordan Peterson, net worth $8 million and climbing. These are your anti-establishment rebels, fighting the system from their million-dollar studios, their bestseller lists, their corporate sponsorship deals. They're getting rich telling you why you should be angry, while making damn sure that anger never goes anywhere dangerous. It's the most beautiful scam ever devised. The system creates its own opposition, controls its own enemies, profits from its own resistance. They don't need to silence you when they can redirect you. They don't need to crush your rebellion when they can monetize it. You're angry about immigration? Here, listen to this guy talk about it for 3 hours while selling you brain pills. You're furious about woke corporations? Subscribe to this premium content where a bow tie wearing manlet explains why you should still shop there because free markets. You're ready to burn it all down. Perfect. Here's a 2-hour podcast about why you should vote harder next time. The controlled opposition serves one fundamental purpose: to take your rage, your energy, your desire for real change, and channel it into safe, profitable, ultimately meaningless directions. They give you permission to be angry as long as you never do anything effective with that anger. They validate your concerns while making sure those concerns never translate into actual resistance. Consider the genius of it. In the old days, when people got angry enough at the system, they grabbed pitchforks and torches. They stormed bastilles. They threw tea into harbors. They shot back. The system had to use actual force to maintain control, which was expensive and messy and created real martyrs. Now they just give you Tucker Carlson. He'll spend an hour every night agreeing with you about how terrible everything is. He'll make faces at the camera that perfectly mirror your own disgust. He'll ask the tough questions that need asking. And then he'll go to commercial break, and you'll feel like you've done something. Like you've participated in the resistance. Like someone with a big platform is fighting for you, but what actually changes? Nothing. Tucker's been on the air for decades. The country has gotten more woke, more degenerate, more anti-white, more anti-male, more anti-Christian every single year he's been broadcasting. His ratings go up. His salary goes up. The decline accelerates. But at least you feel heard. That's the product they're selling, the feeling of resistance without the substance of resistance. The illusion of opposition without the reality of opposition. They're emotional support animals for conservatives, providing comfort while the house burns down around them. Let's examine the business model. Professional conservative makes $5 million a year telling you the country is being destroyed. If the country stopped being destroyed, what happens to his $5 million? If the problems were actually solved, what would he talk about tomorrow? His incentive structure depends on the perpetuation of the problems he claims to oppose. He's not in the business of winning. He's in the business of losing profitably. This is why conservative media is full of people who've never conserved anything. They've been losing gracefully for 50 years while building media empires on the bedrock of that graceful losing. They turn defeat into a brand, surrender into a subscription model, capitulation into content. Ben Shapiro will explain, very quickly, why the latest woke outrage is illogical. He'll cite statistics. He'll reference his Harvard law degree. He'll absolutely demolish some purple-haired college student in a debate watched by millions. And tomorrow there will be 10 more purple-haired college students, and the institutions they represent will be more powerful than ever, and Ben will be richer than ever explaining why this is all very concerning. The cycle is perfect. The outrage generates content. The content generates revenue. The revenue generates more content. The more content, the less actual resistance, because people mistake consuming content about problems for actually addressing problems. They think retweeting is activism. They think subscribing is supporting. They think liking and sharing is the same thing as organizing and fighting. Jordan Peterson is perhaps the most sophisticated version of this operation. He tells young men to clean their rooms and stand up straight while the culture systematically destroys masculinity. He explains the psychological reasons why Western civilization is collapsing while never quite advocating for anything that might stop the collapse. He makes $50,000 per speaking engagement telling you to take personal responsibility while the system makes personal responsibility impossible. His advice isn't wrong. Clean rooms and straight spines are good things. But they're individual solutions to systemic problems, and Peterson knows this. He's smart enough to understand that telling atomized young men to improve themselves personally while offering no collective response to collective threats is ultimately a form of pacification. But individual improvement doesn't threaten the system. If anything, it makes the system's victims more productive. The controlled opposition always offers individual solutions to systemic problems. Lost your job to diversity hiring? Learn to code. Can't afford a house because BlackRock bought your neighborhood? Start a side hustle. Your kids are being groomed at school? Homeschool, if you can afford to have your wife quit her job, which you can't, because we already covered how you lost your job to diversity hiring. None of these people ever suggest that maybe, just maybe, you shouldn't have to solve everything yourself. Maybe some problems require collective action. Maybe some threats require organized resistance. Maybe some enemies need to be defeated rather than debated. But they can't say that, because saying that would make them actual opposition instead of controlled opposition. The tell is always the same. They'll identify the problem with laser precision, but their solutions are always toothless. They'll explain exactly how you're being screwed, then suggest you vote in the next election. They'll document the complete institutional capture of every major organization in America, then recommend you start a newsletter. They'll prove that democracy is fake, then tell you to participate harder in democracy. Tucker Carlson spent years detailing how immigration was destroying the country. His research was impeccable. His arguments were devastating. His reach was enormous. And his solution was always the same: vote for Republicans who will do nothing about immigration while pretending to care about immigration. When Trump was in office and had the power to actually stop immigration, Tucker spent more time attacking his enemies on the left than demanding action from his friends on the right. Because here's what Tucker understands that his audience doesn't: he's not actually trying to stop immigration. He's trying to profit from your anger about immigration. If immigration stopped, what would Tucker talk about? If the problem were solved, what would be the point of his show? His business model requires the perpetuation of the crisis he claims to oppose. This is the grifter economy in a nutshell. Create content around problems you have no intention of solving for an audience that mistakes consumption for action. The angrier your audience gets, the more content they consume. The more content they consume, the less energy they have for actual resistance. It's a perfect system of energy capture and dissipation. The most insidious part is how these people position themselves as brave truth tellers taking enormous risks to speak forbidden truths. Ben Shapiro's dangerous ideas are so dangerous that he's got a $100 million deal with a major media company. Jordan Peterson's controversial opinions are so controversial that he sells out arenas worldwide. Tucker Carlson's censored content is so censored that it reaches millions of people every night. Real dissidents don't get book deals. They don't get speaking tours. They don't get verified Twitter accounts and corporate sponsorships. They get deplatformed, defunded, and destroyed. The fact that these people are still standing, still profitable, still growing their audiences should tell you everything you need to know about how threatening they actually are to the system. Compare their fate to someone like James Alsop, a small-time content creator who attended the wrong rally and got completely unpersoned. Or Nick Fuentes, whose only crime was asking uncomfortable questions about demographics and getting too many young men to listen. or any of the January 6th defendants rotting in federal prison for walking through an open door. The system's treatment of actual dissidents versus its treatment of conservative media stars reveals exactly who poses a real threat and who doesn't. The controlled opposition serves another crucial function. They provide cover for the system's crackdown on actual dissidents. When someone gets deplatformed or arrested, the Ben Shapiros of the world can point to their own success and say, "See? You can still express conservative opinions in America. This guy must have done something really extreme to get banned." They provide plausible deniability for political persecution by proving that good, responsible conservatives who know their place are still allowed to speak. They're the house slaves pointing to their own comfortable position to justify the whipping of the field slaves. If you just behave yourself and say the right things the right way, you can have what I have. They don't mention that what they have is contingent on their willingness to serve the system's interests while providing the illusion of opposition. The Republican Party operates on the same principle. They exist to provide the appearance of political opposition while ensuring that opposition never becomes effective. They'll fight tooth and nail against Democratic proposals, then compromise on a slightly watered-down version of the same proposals. They'll campaign on conservative principles, then govern as moderate Democrats. They'll promise to fight, then explain why fighting is actually counterproductive. Mitch McConnell is the perfect embodiment of this dynamic. He's been in the Senate for nearly 40 years, watching the country move steadily leftward, occasionally making speeches about how concerned he is about this leftward movement, then voting for budgets that fund the very programs driving the country leftward. He's the opposition leader who never opposes anything that matters. The entire conservative establishment operates as a steam valve for right-wing anger. They allow just enough pressure to escape to prevent an explosion, but never enough to actually threaten the system. They give people the feeling that someone is fighting for them without the reality of anyone actually fighting for them. This is why nothing ever changes. Not because conservatives lack political power, they control roughly half the government at any given time. Not because conservative ideas are unpopular, polling consistently shows that most Americans oppose woke excesses. It's because the people who claim to represent conservative interests are actually in the business of managing conservative anger, not channeling it effectively. The system has learned that crushing dissent creates martyrs, but co-opting dissent creates customers. They'd rather have you watching Tucker Carlson than reading Bronze Age Mindset. They'd rather have you listening to Ben Shapiro than following Nick Fuentes. They'd rather have you buying Jordan Peterson's books than joining actual political organizations. They've figured out how to monetize your rebellion and neutralize it simultaneously. They've created a resistance movement that resists nothing, an opposition that opposes nothing, a revolution that revolves around nothing but its own profitability. And the beautiful part, from their perspective, is that you're grateful for it. You actually thank them for the privilege of being pacified. You send them money to keep you calm. You promote their content to your friends. You've become willing participants in your own neutralization. The controlled opposition isn't just failing to fight the system. They're actively serving the system by preventing anyone else from fighting it effectively. They're not just losing gracefully. They're making sure everyone else loses gracefully too. That's the real genius of it. They don't just profit from the status quo. They protect it. They're not just content creators. They're content containment specialists. They're not your leaders. They're your handlers. And until you understand that, until you see through the performance, until you recognize the difference between resistance theater and actual resistance, nothing will ever change. The house will keep burning while your favorite firefighters get rich explaining why water is wet.
That's one way to put it.